What's up, Game Devs? T-Chan here, and welcome to episode 43 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with the best people in the game industry 7 days a week. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast for new daily episode filled with valuable information. Now, let's chat with today's featured guest, Garry Schyman. Garry, it is go time. Are you ready?
I am.
Yes, he is a BAFTA-winning composer that worked on critically acclaimed games such as the Bioshock Trilogy, Dante's Inferno, Shadow of Mordor, and the Destroy All Humans Trilogy. He is one of the most decorated composers in the industry, winning numerous awards, including several Soundtrack of the Year awards. So this is an exciting episode because sound plays a major role that can intensify the experience in video games, and I'm very curious at how it's done. So go ahead, Garry, give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
Sure, and I can just now say, literally within the last few days, I've gotten approval to say that I scored Shadow of War, which is the follow-up to Shadow of Mordor, coming out in October. So I just finished that a few months ago, and excited about that. That's going to be a massive. I scored it with the in-house composer Nathan Grigg, and so, but I wrote 2.5 hours of music. I think he wrote a couple hours as well, so it's a ton of music, but it's a major, really amazing game. So yeah, I studied music composition at the University of Southern California, where I now teach part-time. I teach scoring for video games in the screen scoring program there, with really wonderful program. It's been around for maybe the oldest program for those interested in scoring film, TV games. And so I got out of USC and in the 80s, and I got lucky and started working in television and scored a lot of TV shows. I was what they call a ghost composer for a team called Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, and there was a lot of TV shows in the 80s like the A-Team and Greatest American Hero, Magnum P.I., shows that I worked on in that era. Games were not particularly interesting from a composer's perspective in the 80s, but they got more interesting in the 90s. I did a little bit of video game work in the early 90s for Philips Interactive. They had their own hardware, but that didn't go very far. A friend of mine was working there. He'd hired me for some of their games. But it was not until 2004 that I got my agent at the time sent my resume over to THQ, no longer in business, but they were a huge publisher at that time, and they were making a game called Destroy All Humans, and that serendipitously worked out. They ended up hiring me for that particular game, and so that was my first of my sort of current sort of gen games for hardware platforms like PlayStation, Xbox, etc. And I loved it. I loved working in games. I really thought it was super creative. I liked the people I was working with. The budgets were good enough to permit me to work with an orchestra or to hire an orchestra. And I've been heavily involved in scoring games ever since.
Oh yeah, especially with games like Bioshock and Shadow of Mordor. Those games are huge, and those games are amazing as well. So I definitely recommend people to check that out. Now, your main area of expertise is obviously music composition. What is something we game devs probably don't know about it that we should?
Well, I mean, if you are in the industry and you make games, you know that the scores have the main difference between scores, say for a film or television show and a game, is that although there's some parallels when you're scoring in-game cinematics or in-game movies, which are scored just like a film or television show, the in-game music very often is not locked picture because everybody's experience is going to be unique as they play games. So the gaming techniques, there are techniques for writing interactive music. So the main difference is that you're writing music in a very interactive style, which means loops, and it means layers, it means stingers. There's all sorts of techniques that are utilized to really make it feel as if the player's experience is scored. But in fact, it's impossible because it might take one player 3 minutes to walk through a room, and it might take another player 30 seconds or another one 10 minutes based upon how interested they are in the nooks and crannies or whatever, So it's really the art of writing good music that also works in this interactive fashion to make it match what the player is experiencing.
Yeah, I did not think of that because you're saying like the movies, the music, it just follows the scene. But when a player plays a game, like you say, they could take 30 minutes, they could take 30 seconds. They move in that area differently. So yeah, it does. It's like a really big difference.
Absolutely. So yeah. It just the main difference is that you're scoring something that is not locked picture. When you're scoring a scene in a film, that is locked. That is never going to change when the car takes off. It's always going to take off at the exact same frame. I mean, they may re-edit the scene, but once it is locked, it's done. So you're scoring to picture, and then that music gets mixed at a certain level, with dialogue and sound effects. Is what's called a dub session, and then it's done. It's locked forever. It's frozen in time, and that will never change. But in a game, it's very dynamic. It's very different from every player's perspective. So the music has a different job, shall we say. And ultimately, it's an emotional job where you're trying to connect a player more deeply to the play experience, or you're trying to generate some fear or anxiety in play or whatever it is, whatever's going on.
Now, if people had to teach themselves your expertise, what would you suggest they use?
Well, I mean, learn how to compose. That's the most critical thing. I mean, you need the basic tool set of a composer these days. And it's not only the traditional skills of learning how to write melody and rhythm and harmony and all that, but these days it's a very technologically driven art. Therefore, you need to be familiar with digital audio workstations, the DAWs as they're called, whether it's Pro Tools, Digital Performer, and many others, or several others that composers use. And basically, you're going to be and working with samples and synths and all, and you're going to be mocking up your music. Even if you have an orchestra, if you have the budget for orchestra, you're still going to be mocking up your music to get approved, to make sure it's working, to make sure that the style of the music, the approach is approved by the folks hiring you. So all that, and in fact, some games where there is insufficient budget, you may literally be writing the music in the box and producing it and delivering it, and it's done. So you may never have a need or the opportunity to work with live players in some instances. And the sounds of samples and synths are extraordinary these days, so you can make quite a beautiful or intense.
Yeah, it's all out there, so you just got to go play with it. Now, overall, what are your key principles for being a better and good music composer?
Well, let me just go one step back. So once you become a composer and you learn the tools of the trade and you learn how to work with the software, then as far as interactive, I think the best things you could do, I mean, you could take a class. You could go to USC and take my class and many other programs. And there's also a number of fantastic books. Michael Sweet has a book, I think, Intercom, Writing Interactive Music, but there's a number of really, really excellent books. I would recommend reading those books and just writing your own interactive music. And also, if you're just starting out, learn how to implement music. Learn how to actually input the musical as well as the other sounds, dialogue, sound effects, etc., into the game using the middleware that's available to professionals these days, which is quite extraordinary. Whether it's WWise or Fmod or other middleware software that implements sound and audio, music, all the above into a game.
Yeah, learn those tool game devs and read books. There's, like you said, plenty of books out there. Now, let's take this on a more personal level. And now you've been on the game industry for years now. What was the worst moment of your career? That one moment that's still vivid in your mind? Be very detailed and tell us that personal story.
You know, I got to say, one of the things I joke about but it's true. As I call the game industry, the Minnesota of the entertainment industry, Minnesota being the kind of place where you go and everybody's in a good mood and happy. And I've really had very few bad experiences working in games. I mean, there were days where I had cues rejected. Every composer has that. You're just pissed off, or you're unhappy with your with the music you produced, or you think that someone just didn't understand how brilliant something you've written should have been respected. So there's certainly days. I'm trying to think of some disaster. I mean, there's times when you feel like you're not getting it. You're not really finding the approach to a game. I think on Bioshock Infinite, I struggled to find just the right approach to it, and it took quite a while, and it was very frustrating. But then once I found it, it was like, yes, it was a hallelujah moment. So that was quite satisfying. So, I mean, look, I may think of something an hour from now, but right now I'm not thinking of any disaster that befell me. I certainly, in writing films, I had some kind of crazy directors that you've had to work with, or shall we say, not particularly grounded in the world. So I've worked with it more in the film industry, and I think you will find this with any composer. There's experiences where you work with someone who's unreasonable, or And I remember one experience, and this goes back to scoring a lot of TV movies in the 90s, where I had literally originally I was given 3 weeks to score this TV movie, and it was like a lot of music, like 70 minutes of music. But then NBC, which was the broadcaster, had rejected the edit. This was before I scored it. They had rejected the edit from the production company. So they re-edited the film and took 2 weeks to do that. And then basically they threw it back to me and they said, well, okay, you now have 7 days to write 70 minutes of music. And, you really 2 or 3 minutes a day is all you good music. So that was one of the most extraordinary, stressful weeks of my entire life. It was very, very painful and horrible. So I did finish in time, and I got almost no sleep for a week. It was so awful. So that'd be the worst.
Yeah, in terms of the game industry, it sounded like you had a great time. The Minnesota, as you said, from like the film perspective or TV perspective, it's not as glamorous. But from that experience, what do you want to make sure game developers, especially people that want to become music composers, take away from that experience? Especially like you say, in Bioshock Infinite took you a while to hit the right note, I guess. What do you want to make sure a game does take away from that experience?
Well, in Bioshock Infinite, it was interesting because I was struggling to find the right approach, and then because I was hired early on, and then they went to E3. They showed a demo, of course, as is often done at E3, and the demo had this Elizabeth character. If you've ever played Infinite, you'll know about Elizabeth. And she's an AI, an artificial intelligence, so she's sort of like your partner going through the game. And she was of minimal importance, but she was prominent in the demo. And then the reaction to her was so strong, and everybody was writing about Elizabeth in terms of the writers and the press covering Bioshock Infinite, so that Ken and the rest of the crew making the game, Ken Levine, decided that she would play a much more prominent and important and central role. And it was that decision that prompted me to write a theme for her that really got me started. So in retrospect, I realized that the reason I was struggling was because I don't think they entirely had settled on the direction for the game. And then once they did, I found direction, and I was able to really move quickly forward with the score. That I wrote a theme for Elizabeth, and Ken Levine really loved it. And so that was just the experience, the primal, beginning of, wow, this is what this game is about, and this is how to approach a score. So it became easy once I think they knew what the game was about. Yeah. So sort of in a way, I sort of was unhappy that I hadn't found it, but then it made much more sense to me of why I hadn't found it, because I kind of discovered the game with them, and the score. So I think that the important thing to do is, if you trust and believe in your composer, is to give them time to find the right approach, to really experiment, to make mistakes, to write stupid music that doesn't work, that, without being offensive, to say, that's not working. Let's try a different approach. Give them time to discover the approach that's needed. I think that's really critically important. If you want something good, really permit whoever the composer is to experiment. Give them as much information as you can. And that's the thing. That's the other thing I always tell my students. We composers know music better than the people who are hiring us. Otherwise, they wouldn't hire us. But what we don't understand better than they, and that means the developers themselves, is what the game is really about. What is at the center of this creative work that they're making? And though you may come up with some really cool and brilliant piece of music, it may not be right for their game, and you have to respect that they have some intimate connection to it that you don't have, and that's okay. And you need to learn from that, and you need to respect that. And better music that is better for the game, because a piece of music can be brilliant and totally wrong for a game. That can be true of a film or television show as well. You could write some brilliant piece of music, just it doesn't work for that project, So it's really about listening and understanding and trusting that they have some insight that you can really learn from. And it takes a little time, I think, sometimes for a composer. Not every composer, but a lot of composers, I think, struggle with that. A cue is rejected, and they're very disheartened by that. But that's really the way you should look at that. That's information that you really need to know. Think about it. If you hire a plumber and they come to your house, they do a horrible job, and you don't tell them, you'll just never hire that plumber again, right?
Yeah.
Well, the same is true with a composer. If they don't communicate to you, if they don't tell you what they like and what they don't like, you don't know. You'll just, you need to know, and it's important to accept that. And very often, in my experience, the cue that gets rejected, the next cue is sometimes the best music for that particular project, because you have some insight that you've learned from that experience.
Yeah, having a clear communication and clear goal of the game will make it much easier for composers to make the music, and more freedom as well, of course. What is the best investment you've made? And it could be investment of money, time, or energy. And how did you decide to make that investment?
Well, I think there's been a lot of investments. Certainly, the investment in learning, that's time. And you have to constantly be learning. So, I'm always studying music. I'm always listening to other composers' music. I'm listening to classical music. I'm listening to pop music. I'm listening to jazz. And so that's an investment in time. And that's really, if anybody's out there who's ever read a really famous book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Mm-hmm, I read that.
Yeah, he talks about sharpening your saw, or whatever term he uses, about constantly keeping your learning and growth as a creative person. So I think that's certainly critical. Obviously, you need to invest. I've invested in the software and the hardware that I need to create music at home, in my home studio, and invest the time in friendships. I think it's really critically important to have friendships with both the people you work with, and it's not all just about music too. I think you need to invest in yourself and make sure that your health and physical health, your mental health. I think that much of what helps a person succeed in life is their mental attitude, and I think it's very hard to make a living as a composer. I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's a really competitive, very difficult industry to survive in. So it's really critically important that your mental attitude towards your work and your life is balanced, and you take the time to explore those things, those philosophical, psychological elements of your life that are critical to keeping you and your attitude really, really positive, or as positive as possible. You're going to have down days, but you really need to constantly inspire yourself.
Yeah, you got to invest in yourself, invest in your relationship, invest in your mind and body. All that is so important. Awesome. Don't forget Game Devs. You can check out my website for all the show notes. And now we have reached crunch time, Garry. So basically, I would ask you quick questions and you'd be giving us a ton of valuable information in return. Are you ready to crush it and release the show?
Yes.
Yes. So what was holding you back from joining the game industry earlier?
I wasn't a gamer, and I was in film and TV, and I didn't really know. I didn't know how cool it was, and even then, it was like, how do you get? If I would have tried to get into the industry, I probably would have floundered around. It was pure luck and serendipity that got me involved in the industry. So it wasn't like I wasn't interested. It was like I just wasn't focused on it, and then pure luck got me in. And then once I was involved, I went, "This is a really important and fascinating part of the industry." I still score film and TV, by the way, but I mean, games are just such a amazing technology, and that keeps expanding. And the only thing that kept me from it was just ignorance of what was happening in the industry.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a game developer now with this big booming now. What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I don't know, exercise. You need to focus and have a lot of discipline, shall we say. And I think it really helps to be in physical and mental good shape to do it, and to really, we're so distracted these days, the internet and stuff constantly coming at you. It's really important to be able to focus, So I think that's critical.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I had a composition teacher when I was just out of college, really an amazing guy named George Tremblay. And he spent 3 years with him studying a very sort of obscure technique called 12-toner serial music. But the important thing that he communicated to me was, because I would look at the great classical composers and I'd go, I'm not a Beethoven, I'm not Bach, I'm not Mahler. And he'd say, you're not, but you have something to say that's really important musically. And it's really important for you to believe that. And he made me believe it. And that was really, really, really made a difference in my life, to believe I had something musical to say, and that it was valuable, and that I should pursue this career.
I love that. You believed in your work. Share an internet resource we game devs should use.
Freesound.org.
Oh yeah, that's an awesome site.
Isn't that a great site? I love it. I go up there and sometimes hunt and peck for some weird, cool sound that could be interesting in a musical cue I'm doing. So that would be one that just comes to the top of my head.
I would definitely link that up. Now, this next question is a bit of a doozy, so take your time if you need to. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of, and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to become a great game composer?
Well, of course, you're saying I already have the experience. So I guess if I just had a laptop, I'd probably invest in the software and the sounds that I needed that are critical to any composer these days succeeding. I use Digital Performer. A lot of people use Logic, Pro Tools, whatever. But I would invest in that and really get my actual build. Even though I know how to do it in this theoretical situation, I would need the hardware and software to make it possible to sort of build demos, because it's critically important to be able to have a demo to play for someone before they would even consider hiring you. So I'd have to start writing music like mad and create a whole bunch of really original, interesting demos that could highlight my skills and abilities. And then I would go to GDC, start introducing myself. That part strikes me as the most unpleasant, because it really is. That's the hard thing. That you may have these skills, you may have this talent, and yet you really still need to connect to people. It's a people business.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a people business. Maybe the working at the post office isn't. I don't know. You can, once you're in, you're in. But if you're talking about, the entertainment industry, which is super competitive, that would be sort of the slow, slog towards, connecting to people, introducing yourself, making sure that people who could potentially hire you heard your music, and that you had the music demos that you're creating from scratch, to play for them that would impress them, So I guess that and all the things associated with, again, being able to technologically and, write and record music, etc.
Yeah, you just gave it to us. Invest in the software, invest in yourself to learn the skills, and then have some demos, because, you have to show it, and then go network like GDC and show your stuff out and make meaningful relationship. That's awesome. Now we have reached the end. Go ahead and give us a parting piece of guidance and how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Parting advice, if you really want to do this, you have to be just super committed to it. You have to have the attitude. My favorite Winston Churchill quote is never give up, never give up, never, never, never give up. That sticks with me. And if someone is really determined to succeed, you need to have that attitude. And then believe in yourself. Believe that you have something important to say, and that you need to express this in your life. This is a critical thing. So I think those are two bits of advice. Have the grit and the tenacity to stick with it under an assault from the real world, which keeps rejecting you and saying no until someone finally says yes. And then connect to me on Facebook. On Twitter, I'm Shy Musica. Instagram, I'm Shy Musica, although I'm not much of an Instagram user. I should be, I suppose. And they go to my website, GarrySchyman.com. Garry has 2 R's, SCHYMAN. And that's it.
There you go. Never give up. Check him out. Garry, he is a great person to model after of. Garry, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and for that, we are truly grateful. We look forward to your future work, and until then, we will catch you next time.
All right, you're welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening, and remember that knowledge is only potential power. Execution is the game. I am so excited to announce our first sponsored giveaway with Game Dev Underground, where a winner can get a free 1-hour consultation with the founder, Tim Rusbeck. So if you have any questions on building and launching your game, get on this giveaway ASAP. This is a $1,000 value, and it can be yours. All you have to do is go to the show notes page at GameDevLoadout.com and sign up for my email list. That's it. So until then, keep on making great games, and I will catch you on the next episode. Bye.